All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evan. I'm a transit planner here with Trinity Metro. Today we're going to be giving an interactive presentation on the upcoming TEXRail schedule changes, which we plan to take effect in early November. And today we're going to be going over why we're planning on changing the schedule, what specifically the schedule change is, what some of the trade-offs and alternatives are to this new schedule, and what's next with TEXRail and other related projects. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we did a survey recently, and the respondents indicated that they wanted more midday service. Right now, we just have 30-minute frequency in the morning and late afternoon, early evening, but at this time of day, the middle of the day, we only have 60-minute frequency. We realized that most of our ridership is around this time of day, and we have some early morning and late night trips that have low ridership. And as a result, we decided to cut a few of those early morning and late night trips and slot in some new midday trips, as you'll see later in the presentation. On the next slide, we talk about this is a graph showing the average ridership for each train over the last year. And as you can see, there is a peak right after 12 o'clock. So right around this time of day, that's when our highest ridership is. And on the left and right ends, which is the early morning and late night, that's when our lower ridership is. So what exactly are the schedule changes? We're going to be increasing the midday frequency from 60 minutes to 30 minutes, which will result in 12 new full-length trips. And we're going to be discontinuing 2 early morning trains and 6 late night trains, and that's both directions combined. On the next page, we have the new eastbound schedule. If it has a line through it, it means that trip will be discontinued. If it's shaded, that means that's a new trip. As you can see, the first trip going eastbound from Mercantile to DFW, arriving at Terminal V at 4:06 in the morning, that one will be discontinued. However, there's one just half an hour later, and the one at 4:01 in the morning will start at Mercantile instead of TNP. And the trip that currently starts at 4:31 at Mercantile, that'll start at TNP as well. And there will be 3 new full-length trips at 11:13, 12:13, and 1:13. Those will go all the way from Fort Worth to DFW. And then there's trips that leave TNP at 9:13 and 10:13 in the morning. Right now, those just go to Northside, but those are going to go all the way to Terminal B. And then there's a couple trips that start at Mercantile at 2:31 and 3:31 p.m. Those are going to start at TNP and go all the way. And then those last 3 trips at leaving TNP at 11:43, 12:43, and 1:43, those will be discontinued, meaning the last trip out of TNP will be at 10:43 p.m. Then on the next page, we talk about the westbound schedule changes. The first trip from Northside to TNP, it's a short trip at 3:20 in the morning. That'll now be at 3:50 in the morning. And the first trip out of DFW at 4:40, that'll now be at 5:10 instead. And then we'll have 5 new trips going the full length from Terminal B all the way to TNP at 10:10, 11:10 a.m., and 12:10, 1:10, and 2:10 p.m. And the last trip out of Terminal B going all the way to Fort Worth will be at 11:40 p.m., and the last trip from Terminal B ending at Mercantile will be at 12:10 a.m. And now we've reached the interactive portion of our meeting. There's 3 questions. You'll have about a minute to answer all 3, and then we're going to talk about the results. If you have the QR code and you haven't scanned it already, you can go ahead and scan the QR code and you'll be able to answer the questions there. And if you don't have the presentation on your phone, we'll also be asking the questions, and we'll be recording your responses as well with your hand raised. The first question that we have is, will the increased midday service be helpful to you once implemented? And then the second question that we have is, how likely are you to ride TEXRail once the schedule is expanded and optimized? And then the third question that we have is, in the future, besides the middle of the day, what time of day would benefit the most from higher frequency? So take about a minute to answer those, and then we'll be giving a report on the answers in just a minute.
For those not on your phone, if you think it's going to be helpful, you can also raise your hand too. So if you think it's going to be more helpful, midday service every 30 minutes, you can raise your hand if you think that might be helpful. We got a couple of hands. Okay. Next question.
For the
So for those that are participating by phone, will the increased midday service be helpful once it's implemented? There's 25% says yes, 50% says no, and 25% said there'll be no change. How likely are you to ride TEXRail once the schedule has been expanded and optimized? There was 29% that said very likely, 57% said they will be unlikely, and 14% said no change. Besides midday, what time of day would benefit mostly from the higher frequency? There was 83% that said early morning, there was 0% that said evening, and there was 17% that said late night.
All right. Thank you, Monica. We'll be moving on with the presentation. We'll be talking about the trade-offs to this new schedule change. As we discussed earlier, we're eliminating a few early morning and late night trips. This means that some riders, for example, if you take that 343 train out of TNP, that'll now start at Mercantile. So you'll just have to make your way to Mercantile to get to DFW at the same time. And then talking about some alternatives, as just discussed, the first train out of Mercantile at 3:31, that'll now be half an hour later at 4:01 in the morning. And the last three trains going eastbound, those will all be discontinued, meaning the last train to arrive Terminal B will arrive at 11:36 p.m. And then going westbound, the first departure out of Terminal B will be at 5:10 a.m. instead of 4:40. And the last three westbound trips will all be discontinued, meaning the last trip to go the full length from Terminal B all the way to Fort Worth will be at 11:40 p.m. And the last trip going from Terminal B to Mercantile will be at 12:10 a.m. Next, we're going to talk about some updates with Silver Line. The Silver Line will connect with TEXRail at Terminal B and DFW North. It's planned to open in 2026. They've been doing test runs on it in various segments, and it's about 65% complete. And next, we have our very own TEXRail extension from TNP to the Medical District. We hope to start construction next year in 2025 and commence service in 2028, and there will be a planned new mixed-use development next to the new station at the south side. And thank you very much for participating.